Okay, we are here this is Baltimore City Council Budget and Appropriations Committee. We are here for Technology All Services with Baltimore City Information Technology, or BSIT, and Law Department. I'm Councilman Eric Costello from the 11th District, Chair of the committee. I'm joined to my left by Vice Chair of the committee, Councilman Leon Pinkett from the 7th District, Council President Brandon Scott. To my right, Council Vice President Sharon Green Middleton, 6th District member of the committee, Councilwoman Shannon Sneed, 13th District member of the committee, Councilman John Bullock, 9th District, Councilman Bill Henry, 4th District member of the committee. We're also joined, she's walking around somewhere, Marguerite Curran to my immediate right, staff to the committee. We have Jeff Amoros representing Mayor Jack Young. We also have Rebecca Tab Simmons from the Office of Council President Brandon Scott. We've also been joined by Councilman Ryan Dorsey from the 3rd District, Councilman Isaac Yitzi Schleifer from the 5th District, member of the committee. Colleagues, before we begin, I want to go over some ground rules for this hearing. I disseminated a memo which was provided to everyone about 45 minutes ago based on conversations that the Council President and I have had with the administration. We are asking to keep the following topics off limits due to the sensitivity of the recent cybersecurity attack. Specifically, those topics include: 1, specific details of the investigation, including the who, what, and how. 2, status of the FBI's involvement. 3, who or what was responsible for the cybersecurity attack. 4, specific questions about our current IT security posture, including security weaknesses, patching that may still need to be completed, and what specific data was lost during the cyber attack. 5, how secure the network is today. And 6, how is the network configured, i.e. segmenting, backups, etc. If a question is asked that is within the scope of the above, please note that I will direct the CIO or any other representative from the administration not to answer that question. In addition, the city solicitor, Judge Davis, is here, along with his deputy, Dana Moore. If there is and they will be here for the duration of the hearing. Should the CIO be asked a question that does not fit the above 6 topics that I mentioned, the city solicitor or the deputy, if a question is asked that does not fit those topics, but does jeopardize the city's position, ability to recover, or potentially exposes existing vulnerabilities, the city solicitor will explain the reason why the question will not be answered. The administration has agreed that the city solicitor's response will be in a clear and simple terms that explains why answering the question would put the city at additional risk. Please note that the new Cybersecurity and Emergency Preparedness Committee established by Council President Scott, which will be co-chaired by Councilman Schleifer and myself, will provide a more appropriate forum at a future date for us to get answers to these questions. More information and timing on that committee will follow after guidance is provided by Council President Scott. Colleagues, is everyone clear on what I just read? Sure. Are there any questions before we begin? Okay. We also have with us here today David McMillan, who heads up the Mayor's Office of Emergency Management, one in a support capacity to BCIT, because there are going to be questions about what happened over the past month. In addition, Mr. McMillan had another engagement yesterday when fire department was here. So we will have time to ask OEM department-specific questions that are outside of the scope of all technology services. So those are a fair game here. In addition, where's Lisa Allen? Lisa, oh, you're hiding back there. How are you, Lisa? Lisa Allen, who we all know and who runs the 311 call center, is going to be leaving around 4:30 p.m. So what we're going to do is probably around 3:45 p.m., 3:30 or 3:45 p.m., we are going to narrow the scope of questions to just Lisa and her shop, so we can get Lisa out of here on time. Is everyone good with that? At what time? At about 3:30 p.m. plus or minus. If I've gone past that, if someone could please remind me. We'll set aside time for Lisa Allen's specific questions for 311. Any questions before we begin? Microphone, please, Councilman. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, does that mean that you would rather we not ask 311 specific questions until that time?
Yes, that's what I'm asking.
Okay.
Focus on BSIT first. Any other questions, colleagues? We've also been joined by Councilman Z. Cohen from the 1st District. Mr. Johnson, if you'd take it away, I'd ask that you keep your presentation to no more than 10 minutes.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I am Frank Johnson, Director of Baltimore City IT and the city's CIO. I have a great pleasure of leading a great team of people who are right now working around the clock, solely focused on getting the city back online. There are a couple of other members of our staff I would like to introduce. Very recently, we had the pleasure of joining our team, an amazing IT leader, Mr. Todd Carter. He's the department's deputy CIO. Todd's first day on the job was Monday, May 6th. And as we all know, the world changed for us on Tuesday, May 7th. So his onboarding has been nothing but abnormal, but he has been a great partner and much needed leadership in this time of crisis. Second, our fiscal officer, Mark Cherry, sitting right behind me, helped us develop a lot of our slides and our budget requests. He's here also to help answer any questions. Oh, and last but not least, too, I can't get started without thanking my partners who helped us prepare. First and foremost, David McMillan from MOEM. He was an amazing partner to help us manage through the crisis, our team finance, and all of our friends in law. Thank you very much. Before I do get started, Chairman Costello, I'd like to thank you two very much for giving me the courtesy and the heads up to be prepared for 2 conversations today. We do have prepared budget slides. We'll keep this to 5 to 10 minutes. I also have, again, with the constraints that were outlined, a couple of pages of notes of things that we can talk about the ransomware event, and I'll do the best I can to answer any of those questions that are currently in scope.
So Frank, how long would you say the latter presentation is, not the slides, but the other piece?
I was going to leave this up to Q&A and just try to answer as many of these. This isn't quite prepared, just a running list of notes.
Okay. Do you want to present something related to that after the presentation, or do you want to just get right into questions?
I think it would be easier just to make sure that we go through I didn't prepare this in a prepared presentation way. These were just handwritten notes, real-time, late last night.
We'll get right into question and answers after.
Yeah, I think that would be the best, if that's okay. And again, thank you again very much for the opportunity and the heads up to be prepared for both today. This is service number 802. It's a general administration. This budgeting affords us a couple of much needed key leadership positions. We've been operating without a contracts office, worked very closely in conjunction with Aaron Scher and the procurement team, but one of the things that's slowing down some of our modernization efforts is not having our own contract capability. In order to complement to enough financial services capability, and since people are our passion and staffing is our #1 priority, human capital capability, or more human capital capability. Next, service number 803. This is the bulk of our core IT service capability. This is where our Agile DevOps team sits, project management office, our legacy team, GIS team, which we do manage for citywide. Our data team, by the way, also a fairly new hire. We have an amazing chief data officer who recently joined the team 2 Mondays ago. He's going to help drive a lot of our civic-wide and data analytics strategy, as well as a lot of our open data platform strategy. This budget item, because of the job market that we're in, we have a large number of contractors out of necessity that run most of our staffing. This will allow us to transfer those contractors to FTEs. After that transition is done, this should become a zero-sum game, if I had that right, Bob. Next, 311. Again, Lisa's here. I'll let her speak to this, but she's done an amazing job in 2018 modernizing the 311 call-taking system to Salesforce.com. She's recently back a month ago and actually received a national award by that industry that hands out such awards. It's absolutely an amazing capability. Congratulations to her and her team. You see some of the stats down there at the bottom. I'll let her speak to these later. But the recommendation here is to keep current service level. However, we do need to add at least one technician to the team to help manage and do a better job of taking care of the new cloud-based Salesforce.com capability. Next, service number 805. These are the core IT delivery services. A lot of the stuff that's embedded in here, some of this is billed back from other departments to cover radios. BCIT Central is responsible for the CCTV operations, the 800 megahertz public safety radio system, connectivity across the city, Microsoft licenses, and the PC refresh. Some of the major items that are included in here is to help the police department upgrade its aging radio fleet, continue to incrementally improve the 800 megahertz capability, which is absolutely a wonderful asset to the city that needs to be invested in and nurtured and maintained, as well as $2.4 million because our consumption of Microsoft products continues to increase, and we pay the license fees on usage for the entire city. Last but not least, I would like to note one thing at the bottom. It's brought to my attention under effectiveness, if you can read that, percent of help desk resolution times for critical priority tickets within 4 hours. You'll see a dip there from 96%, 95% in FY18 to 87%. That precipitated a leadership change. We've been upgrading the leadership team within BCIT proper. We now have a leader who is modernizing our help desk capability, and we're on the road to recovery from statistics that would represent that, as well as a new ticketing system. Oh my, okay, this looks like it's been upgraded. I was asked to speak to the capital budget. Can't begin to tell you how much we appreciate the capital budget. It has been steadily on the increase from FY17 to 18 to 19. Last year there was $4.7 million in capital that was set aside to improve city infrastructure. This year is $9.7 million. These things will go to increasing our cybersecurity capabilities, virtual private networks, increasing our fiber, data center divergence, data center redundancy, all of those things that will add much needed resiliency to our overall capability. If you need more detail on exactly where we're spending this money, we do have that detail for you in quite a amount of depth, as well as where the $4.7 million in capital was spent last year. That's pretty much it. I will state, just to make sure that we're clear before we start taking questions, everybody is aware that BCIT's budget represents a portion of the city's overall IT investment, not all of it. We are not quite unified we might be in spirit and from a management perspective, but some of the budgets that go towards the overall IT spend in the city do wind up in other departments. A summary of some of the key highlights. I know that Bob's highlighted in his presentation is found in your budget book on page 138. We've been working really hard with the Department of Finance to increase our overall investments in technology. Quite pleased that in this budget cycle that is true. It might not be reflected in BCIT's budget, but it is reflected in the overall budget line items, and you can see some of those highlights on 138.
Thank you. Edilus. Dorsey. Colleagues, before we begin, we're going to, for this hearing, strictly adhere to the two-question rule. We will cycle through the entire council multiple times on this. We're here for 3.5 hours, so I will remind you if you've exceeded the 2 questions. Thank you for being here. I need to make one comment in reference to the incident.
Yes, sir.
I am profoundly disappointed in the response to this incident and the lack of communication that has come from your office as a result of it. And I am further disappointed that the Emergency Operations Center was not immediately activated when this happened. And I'll leave it at that. First question is, there were 125 positions budgeted for fiscal year 2019. Of those 125 positions, how many of those perform security functions as their primary job function?
I'd have to get the exact number for you, but it's a handful. Of the 125, is Mark here? Could you help me out with the exact numbers, Mark? 50 or...
Sir, if you could just say your name and
There
your
it is.
position title.
Thank you.
Mark Cherry, I'm CFO for BSIT. So, of the 125, we roughly have 4 FTE positions. The rest are contractors that sit in that
And
and security.
4 in security?
Yes.
Okay,
The rest are
and-
contractors that supplement the group.
And we're adding 25 this year. How many of those will have a primary role of security?
Out of the 25, the way it's slated right now, there are additional 4 that are going to that group.
Are you planning to rethink that in light of what happened?
I'll have to defer for it.
If I may address that, Councilman Costello, one of the things I'd like to quickly cover is anytime you refresh anything, whether it's people, process, or product, those are the big 3 Ps. Anytime you refresh anything, you're improving your overall resiliency. And we're firm believers that cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. So training for everybody that works in IT across the city is a key component of what needs to be done. So in other words, our cybersecurity capability is more than just the dedicated individuals that have those skills. They're very, very critically important. But one of the things that we can absolutely continue to do to improve our resiliency against attacks like this is to freshen everything up, people, processes, and product. And that absolutely a key tenet of our priority. Every dollar we spend of capital to buy a new switch, router, or firewall absolutely increases the city's resiliency.
So to my original question, it's 4 out of 25.
Is that the exact number, Mark? For now? Yes.
Thank you. My second question is, BSIT intends to spend $8 million in fiscal year 20, or nearly 25% of its budget on contractual services. Can you explain at a high level what those contractual services are? And there's a document request related to this one, Jeff,
Yep.
which I'll get
Mark,
to in a moment.
is that the people? Is that the people contractual cost?
7 million people.
Yeah. Again, because of the, if I can explain, the job market is absolutely on fire from a supply-demand standpoint, and there's a competition for tech talent is absolutely through the roof. There's a guesstimate about 50 to 70,000 openings alone in the Baltimore-Washington corridor for cyber talent alone right now. As a result, we tend to have to do a lot of staff augmentation by using contractors. One of the programs we worked out this year is there are a number of those people who would like to be full-time equivalent employees. So with a little bit of incremental budget, move those people from contract to FTE. That should level itself out in the next coming months as we activate that activity.
Okay, and the bulk of that, back to the original question, the bulk of that $8 million is being spent on?
For contract, that's for staff augmentation. Is that not right, Mark? Yeah, it's staff augmentation.
Just in general for various
Yes.
different functions?
But most of the, we'll get the numbers for you.
Okay.
But again, it's just current state of the market. We would like to have more FTEs on staff, and when you can't hire FTEs, we have staffing vendors that provide us data people, infrastructure people, cyber people.
That's what I was looking for.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Jeff, the document request associated with that is a list of every BOE-approved contract that continues to be in effect, what each contract will be spent on, the amount of each contract, and the MBE and WBE subcontracting goals of each contract. And please note whether or not the prime is an MBE or a WBE. We've been joined by Councilman Chris Burnett from the 8th District. Councilman, there should be a memo. Thank you. Councilman Schleifer.
So before I ask my questions, I just want to put a previous request on the record for you, Jeff. I wanted to know what is up, what is down, and the things that are still down, which ones have workarounds. And so I want to have that on the record that we need to know these things so that we know where we stand, and I would like for the administration to consider sending that around at least twice a week with updates. So what's up, what's down, And the stuff that's down, which ones have workarounds? Now, my first
Councilman, hang on. Judge Davis, I'm assuming there's not issues with that request, but if there are, you'll review it?
Well, I was going to ask, thanks for recognizing me, Mr. Chairman.
Actually, hang on one second, Judge, pardon me. Jeff, what we're going to do for the document request for this hearing is we're going to get them to Judge Davis. So, Judge, what we'll do is, because we're aggregating a list, what are we at, 130?
That's 125.
So we've made 125 requests this week of the administration for documents and answers to questions. What we're going to do is, after this hearing, Jeff will send the list to you and Ms. Moore and copy me on it. And then you can review the list. And if you have concerns, then we don't have to ask you each time. Then if you have concerns, you can note what those concerns are. Hey, we're not doing 3 of the 10 because reason A, B, and C. And then you can let us know, and then we can talk from there.
That's great.
Does that work?
That works fine. Yeah.
Outstanding. Thank you, Judge. I apologize for
I'm
interrupting.
just told that you're about to receive a response either later today or first thing Monday, Councilman,
So that one's
to
approved.
that specific request.
Okay, Councilman, you got 2 questions.
Right,
Take
because
it away.
90% of my questions are off limits now, so I want to, at least the ones that are on limits, I'd like responses to. So thank you, Judge. When you make a large purchase, such as a house or a car, typically the first thing you do is you buy an insurance policy. You want to make sure everything's protected. And so this year's budget, we have a request in front of us for about $8 million, which is a 28% increase to your budget. This is the same time when other agencies have been asked to submit budgets with cuts and other things that have been reduced. In my hand is a document that was provided to me recently from BMMR based on the budget request of that $8 million, a 28% increase. And I briefly looked through it because we had short time to go through it. And the word cybersecurity is only in this once from my recollection, from just skimming through it. Do you guys plan to submit an addendum to this year's budget about changing up this $8 million to what that should go towards?
So the question specifically is cybersecurity insurance?
No, the question specifically is, do you plan to change this? This document was prepared back in December and submitted to BMMR along with this increase in your budget. Do you plan to, now that this money is being allocated in your budget, the additional 28%, do you plan to change up where that money should go?
I have not had a chance to discuss that with finance, but just to be clear, our year-on-year operating budget, which covers our people and core processes, is flat year-on-year. The extra $8 million that you're seeing is absolutely specifically destined for upgrading police radios, paying for licenses to Microsoft and their usage, and one other thing. But Bob, do I have that correct? Yeah.
So you guys don't know if you're going to change up some of that proposal to, in light of recent events?
I don't even know if I do. Bob, can you help me? Do we even have the ability to change the police radios and Microsoft licenses to something else at this point?
Not on those items, but within the MOIT operating budget, there is flexibility within the budget to move line items around. Of course, we'd need to work with MOIT to figure out what would be shifted and what would go, but we can definitely work on that in light of the recent events.
So the answer in general, Councilman, is absolutely everything's being reevaluated to hardening the environment from a people, process, and product standpoint. That is absolutely the priority. All of those things are being reevaluated real time. We're not yet at the point, Mark, unless you're going to correct me, where we're going to make specific recommendations as to how we shift dollars around. But I would expect that to happen. I just can't comment mechanically on when we'll be able to tell you specifically monies that should be shifted from point A to point B to help address what we're remediating and recovering from right now, if that makes sense.
I guess it makes sense on the short term, so some of that stuff would be changed around. I guess a bigger picture question on this, which I assume the chair is going to consider as my second question, so I'll make it worthwhile, is in reading the 5-year strategic plan also, this document certainly reflects that, and so I applaud a lot of the great things that are in the 5-year strategic plan, such as upgrading a lot of our systems and streamlining a lot of government, which certainly needs to be streamlined. Are you, after this is all over, going to go back and revisit that 5-year plan and adjust that accordingly so that in future budget years it will have an updated proposal? Or are we going to stick with the same 5-year plan that I guess started last year?
I'm a firm believer in that strategic plans need to be updated annually to reflect the current things of the time. It's, you don't write some, they need to be fluid for reasons like this. The priorities of that plan absolutely should be reevaluated based on what we're going through today. From a sharpening our pencil and working on what those priorities are, again, we work in very, very close collaboration with the finance department, spent many times in Director Raymond's and Bob Seneme's office going through what are the priorities before this happened. I would expect those to change after it.
Okay, that's good to hear. And you had said on this slide that this was new. When was this last slide made, do you know?
I have an older copy of that. I'm not sure who reformatted that slide. I haven't seen it. Yeah, but mine's in a slightly different format from what you're looking at. The copy I have in front of me.
So was it
can't
made at
read
the
that.
same time as the rest of the slides?
I may have an older version than you have when I was getting prepared, Councilman. My apologies. I'll take a look at the list you're looking at just to confirm it if I can. Somebody could get me a copy.
Because I like the new slide better than the older proposals. So I was just wondering.
Well, if
when
I
those
take a
changes
look at
were
it, I
made.
might agree with you really quickly. Oh, there it is. Okay. Every one of these things were part of our original budget request. Every one of them. And every one of them will, if enacted with the 9.7 million, will absolutely contribute to making our infrastructure much more resilient than it is today. Guaranteed.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Henry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon.
Hi, sir. How are you?
I might only have one question. Still working on the second one. But it's a question that basically I'm conveying because it's the question that I get asked
Yes, sir.
all the time. And Mr. Chair, I think that I've avoided the areas in the memo that I'm not supposed to.
Please proceed, and I'll let you know if you have not.
But given the substantial amount of money that we're going to spend rebuilding an appropriately secure system,
Yes, sir.
and the comparatively small amount of ransom that was demanded to have immediate access to our data, the question I keep getting asked, which I don't have an answer to, is why didn't we just do both?
So we can answer that.
We can answer that. Yes, we can answer that. We'd be throwing away $86,000,
Yeah.
Well,
but I'll allow the director to answer that. But that's,
Yeah.
Councilman, that's what we'd be doing.
well, and let me stress that I have been told by others. I have not sat down and made a careful analysis or study, but I have been told anecdotally that a number of other cities and large organizations that have been similarly attacked, some of them pay the ransom and get their data back, some don't. I understand that it's a gamble. I am just asking why, like, maybe I should be asking, how did that decision tree work in terms of, given, like I said, the relatively small amount compared to other aspects of this, why we did not gamble $86,000 on the chance of having immediate access to our data.
Councilman, I'm gonna actually answer the question. So there are conflicting opinions in the IT industry over whether or not you should pay the ransom. On one hand, you can pay it. On the other hand, you can choose not to pay it. If you do pay it with digital currency, you're paying it to an unknown entity, and there's no guarantee that your data will be given back,
Right.
or that there are other things lying within the system that could be used against you the following hour or the following day. So we've talked to a number of folks in this industry, and there's a varying degree of responses. And I think they made a decision not to pay it. I think that we may be getting into the danger zone of questions as to why they made that decision. We do know that that's the decision they've made, and that's the decision that they're sticking with. And I think that's something that we may have to consider getting into when we get into the special committee hearings.
The why.
The why, yeah. I'm not defending the administration. I'm merely pointing out that there's mixed thoughts in the industry on whether you pay it or not. They've clearly chosen to not pay it and clearly said that we're not going to pay it. That's the decision that's been made. And I think that we need to get insight from them as we start to address this at the special
If
committee.
I may, Mr. Chairman, just very briefly to add what you said. On process, Councilman, the process was rigorous. There were discussions at the highest level of city government with experts, with law enforcement, and it was not a decision made in a couple of minutes.
Oh, sure.
And one of the implications of your question is perfectly appropriate, and we all had the same implication, frankly. Can we just do this and take this relatively small risk? And we thoroughly examined that possibility, and the decision was made.
So, Mr. Chair, if I'm understanding this correctly, would it be more appropriate during I'm sorry, what's the name of the committee?
Yes, that's actually what I just said,
Yeah,
Councilman. This would be a more appropriate topic for that forum.
Would it be, so will that committee be the place where we would be able to find out exactly who were the experts who recommended the course of action that was chosen?
It would certainly be much more likely than in this setting, yes.
Okay.
That discussion is completely off limits, the experts that they spoke with to come to this decision.
Okay.
Yep.
All
But
right,
we can
then-
address that.
Then I will be happy to wait for that committee's deliberations to pursue this line of questioning.
I appreciate that, Councilman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. President?
Thank you, and thank you, Director Johnson. I'm going to
Thank you,
give you
sir.
a IT security break for 1 second to talk about another topic that's important to the council.
Thank you.
You know, we are in the first year of the implementation of my equity assessment program. I just want to ask you a few questions to gauge your agency's process. Has your agency hired or identified an equity coordinator?
We do not specifically have an equity coordinator. However, if I may, my mom was an executive, broke a lot of glass ceilings for women in the workplace, and ever since then, I've been a big champion of women in the workplace, and then following that, diversity and inclusion. I have an amazing tech human capital director who helps me build the staff, and I'm very, very proud of our diversity and inclusion record in our hiring in the IT department, including our leadership team. Very, very impressed with that. Specifically, do we have a
Coordinator. Equity
coordinator? No, but our diversity and inclusion goals present in our hiring? Absolutely.
All right, thanks. Just a reminder, well, let me ask all the questions first. Have you held or scheduled any equity trainings for your department on equity and inclusion?
We actually just completed a diversity and inclusion training at our last management offsite, and we can share that details of that with you. Mark, you and Lisa were both there. When was it? A couple months ago? It was a couple months ago. We held a leadership offsite, and it was all about organizational development, team development, and diversity and inclusion.
Well, we would love to hear. If someone wants to talk about it, come.
You weren't at the meeting?
Sir, can you tell us about this training?
Sure. Some of the points in the training brought out, there were different workshops that pointed out how we select our friends, our family members, and then why we should select people that are different from us, how they bring different things to the table that perhaps we don't think about, and the value of all people.
So, a couple questions for you. One, was every member of the agency, did every member have to attend this training?
This was a leadership workshop.
Okay, thank you. Last question, sir, you can step back for a second, but don't go too far. Last question, Mr. Director. Has your department conducted your baseline analysis of the equity impacts of the agency's existing and proposed actions yet?
I do not know, sir. I'd have to get back to you on that.
Thank you. So I'm asking these questions because, one, just want to let you know, and I know Mr. Amarillo from the mayor's office is going to be following up with you now that he've heard these unacceptable answers. You have to have an equity coordinator on your staff by October the 17th of this year. In addition, you have to have completed trainings for your staff around equity, and equity is defined in our law. It's racial equity, gender, income. And you also have to provide your baseline analysis of the equity impacts of your agency's existing and proposed actions by October the 17th. So all of those have to be.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You have my commitment to that. May I, please?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I'm people are my passion. I'm an organizational development expert. Staffing is our #1 priority. This kind of stuff is easy for us to implement. It's right in our wheelhouse, and we'll gladly take this action. In fact, you have my commitment that we'll do this well before the intended date.
Thank you. And in the vein of IT problems, I just want to point out to my colleagues and to anyone that is listening, we're currently having problems, IT problems, streaming this hearing. And so, Mr. Director, this is, unfortunately for the council, this is something that happens quite frequently. So we would greatly appreciate you working with the folks from Cable and Communications to figure out how that can be avoided in the future.
Yes,
We've
sir.
had some of these instances, and oftentimes it happens to be during high-profile hearings, and of course the council gets the blame from the citizens about the hearing not being televised or streamed in this case. Director Johnson, since you took the role as director, can you provide a summary of each IT security initiative that you've implemented?
We would have to give you a detailed report on that, Council President, if that's all right.
Well, do you have something overarching that you can give us?
We do have so the first time in the history of the city, we published an IT annual
Yep.
report. It is posted up on the website. This is what the cover of it looks
Yep.
like, and you can find it there. This is actually the starting point. The level of detail you would like would be in a report that we would have to share with you in confidence. But the answer is absolutely yes.
So that's so, but what I'm asking you, we'll read the report again, but I wanted to know specifically about IT security stuff. Of course, not getting into the things that you can't get into, but overarching themes of the things that you've done around IT security since you stepped foot into the role.
Updated all of our policies and procedures, hardened the perimeter. With your guys' support, actually added new detection capability. Actually, if you don't mind, can I explain this and how we respond to an incident, which
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure that we can. Want to instill some confidence that these are the things that we do on an ongoing basis whenever there's a cyber incident, whether it affects us or someone else. One of my good friends and mentors and colleagues I have a tremendous amount of respect for recently asked me, "Hey Frank, could you explain to me what lessons were learned from the Atlanta ransomware attack? That was SamSam over a year ago. Didn't affect us, but we always respond." So this is how we respond. The answer is yes, we update everything. Number one, we review all of the government reports which are available to us that come loaded chock full of recommendations to make sure that SamSam doesn't invade us. Harden the perimeter, implement all the patches, implement new detection software. By the way, last year we made that request, you approved it, and we implemented it. If we hadn't done so, the current crisis that we're enduring could have been much worse, so thank you again for that. Stepped up our end user email training with phishing emails. Stepped up our alerting to look for SamSam around our perimeter, and then again updated all of our policies and procedures, our InfoSec policy, change management policy, patching, software, firewalls, everything. That's the process that we go through every time there is a cyber incident, whether it's affecting us directly or someone else. And by the way, in general, what we're doing today is we're running through that exact same flow real time, dealing with the incident that is before us today.
Jeff, for each of those documents that the CIO listed, the council would like a copy of every single one.
There's actually the two primary ones, I know there's been a lot of discussion. Can I address this now, please, Eric? There's been a lot of requests and discussion about documents and plans, and sometimes I'm the one that gets confused about policies and procedures and plans because we're updating a lot of these things. I can rest assured the policies that were updated and kept up to date before I showed up, during, and up to today are the two most important. Number one, our InfoSec policy. That is actually available to the public. It should be on our website. It's not there yet. That's available. We can give that to you as soon as I can recover it off of a server. Our change management policy. Every time there is a change to our production systems, a patch, a new piece of code, software, anything, a firewall's updated, our change management policy, how do we, with a fair amount of rigor, update our infrastructure? Those two documents that outline that policy, Councilman Costello, are absolutely available.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Jeff, we're still going to take all of the policies, including the two that he mentioned. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. Chair, I have more questions, but I will stop at my 2 for now to stay within the rules.
Thank you, Mr. President. Vice Chair Pinkett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me find a safe question. So I think Service 803, Enterprise Innovation Application Services, calls for a decrease in contractual services amounting to about $2 million, while at the same time an increase in non-positions amounting to somewhere between $600,000 and $800,000. Can you tell me which contractual services are now being eliminated from that service? And are the non-positions that are being created, are they specific to those contractual services?
Mark, can you help me out? This is just simply a shift from FTE to contract FTE, isn't it? Can you please explain it?
So part of the goals that we have in the organization are to shift from some of our contractual use to create FTE positions. And so that's exactly what the shift is. It's a shift to create more FTE positions, as well as reduce our reliance on some of the contractors that we have. And I'm sorry, the second part of your question?
So those non-positions are specific to the $2 million that we were paying in contractual services? And if that's the case, is that typical in this agency where we pay three times as much through a contract for services that we could do in-house?
Unfortunately, because of the way the industry
Unfortunately?
works. Yes,
Oh.
because of the way the industry currently is, as Director Johnson pointed out, the demand is so high. And so when we go through a staffing vendor, which are all approved through the city's procurement process, we use those ones who are approved. The cost is usually higher than if we do FTEs. And so that's what this shift is to start creating more FTE positions and to reduce that reliance on some of the contractors that we have.
And so we actively go through our budget and our staffing to determine where we can supplement contractual services with actual hires, and that happens on an ongoing basis?
Yes, each manager does so on a regular basis, and we try to make those adjustments wherever we can. Because there are a lot of issues, well, I'm sorry, not a lot of issues, but there are some issues when you use staffing vendors for certain positions.
And while that's not a performance measure in this current budget, is that a performance measure that we would consider moving forward? Because it seems like it would be a pretty good goal for us to see how we could.
Sure, we can definitely take a look at that and see how we can work that into our performance measures.
Do you want that as a follow-up, Councilman?
Yes, please.
Can you? Yep. And after the president, if you guys could just restate the request for Jeff.
Oh, well, I'll let the vice chair restate his first before I do mine.
So I guess the latter request was related to the creation of a performance measure that relates to this agency's efforts to convert contractual services to actual positions in-house.
So we want a written plan for that?
Yes.
Okay. So for that one, that's going to be a joint request from BSIT and BBMR. Obviously, you're looped in on that. Okay.
And I didn't hear what the what contractual services this were represented in this $2 million.
I would have to go back and take a look and tell you exactly which positions we're looking at adjusting.
And I think this is a safe question because it was asked earlier. Was there any security in this $2 million?
For this particular service, no.
Okay.
Security rest in a different service.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Just a follow-up to that. In fiscal year 20, the agency is planning on spending $8 million, which is like 25% of its budget on contractual services. Can you tell us what those contractual services are?
I'm sorry, could you state the question again, please?
You're spending $8 million on contractual. You asked it? Oh, never mind.
Yeah.
Did you request a full list?
Yes.
Mr.
It
Chair?
was-
Great.
okay.
You're good. Have a seat.
Thank you.
You good, Vice Chair? Okay, Dorsey?
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, I just want to kind of make a point here. That the first page in your presentation, Service 802, is administration.
Yes, sir.
Priority outcome is accountability and transparency.
Mm-hmm.
The recommended budget is $3,194,490. Given your salary makes up about 1/12 of that. I basically stopped emailing you a long time ago because you never responded to any of my emails. I don't think that that is accountable or transparent in any way, and I think that that sets the tone for the department, and I don't appreciate it. That's all I have to say.
Very sorry. It'd be my commitment that I'll do better in the future.
Appreciate it. That's all.
Thank you. Burnett?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too had lots of questions that I guess I'll reserve for a later date, but wanted to sort of get a better idea, and I think these are safe questions. What type, and these may actually take the form of a request, Mr. Ambrose, just FYI. What type of training does the IT department provide internal staff? How often, what's included, and what's the budget for that annually?
Yeah. So part of our human capital program is going to include more training. That plan is in development, and as far as I know, there is no line of sight to funding that element of training yet, but it is absolutely part of our comprehensive human capital program. Again,
So sorry, just so I'm clear, you're saying there isn't currently any training for internal staff right now?
pardon me? Oh, there is, sorry. Make sure we're speaking accurately.
Okay.
Yes, there's currently online training that we provide for FTEs and direct city contractors. And there is a small training budget as well in Service 802, the small training line item.
If I may, the point I was trying to make is cities never had a very comprehensive tech-focused human capital program. And we've hired an amazing human capital leader to help us build it because people and staffing is our #1 priority. Even if we had infinite financial resources, we do not have the staff to execute the strategy. Staffing is our #1 priority. And what we need is a comprehensive human capital program, pipeline, retention programs, training. So once that entire human capital program, we'd love to share the details of it with you. It's absolutely going to require some additional funding if we're going to be serious about growing our tech team, which is by far our #1 priority. So Mark is right, we do have some current budget training. However, it's far from sufficient in order to staff and grow our own 21st century tech team, which is absolutely our priority. Does that help answer your question?
It does. If you could provide the committee what that training currently includes,
Okay.
Mr. Ambrose, as a request. What type of training does your department provide city staff, city workers?
Yeah, none that I'm aware of. Now, what we do try to coordinate, but we have to leverage state programs and grants, so we kind of hand to mouth for cybersecurity awareness. That's not a line item in our budget. Typically, funding from that through a grant program comes and goes. Again, last year, by the way, Director Guilford wanted to be here. She passes along her regards. She's at the doctor today. She wanted to be here. She could explain this herself, but that is a program that we've counted on state funding for in the past, and it seems to come and go. But as a part of increased cyber budget, when we talked about shifting some dollars from point A to point B, we need to institutionalize on our wish. By the way, we do have a wish list. A more robust, sustained, funded cybersecurity awareness training for every user in the city is absolutely part of that thought process.
Okay. Yeah, and that's where sort of what I was getting at is my basic understanding of a potential cause of this attack could have been user error. And so my concern is both with training for city workers to, there's a spectrum of generations that work on computers in the city workforce, and so being able to identify certain things is helpful. I will say a kudos to your department in that I recognize in the 2.5 years I've gotten several emails and communications when suspicious emails may have gone out to us. So I want to give kudos for that. That communication has been helpful to note what to click on, what not to click on. But I'm also encouraged to hear, a little bit disappointed that it hasn't happened, that there isn't already sort of robust training or communications that's happening. But I understand budget constraints. And I think that's something that should certainly be a priority moving forward. So not only are your staff prepared to handle any and all things possible, but that the city workforce is also has a better understanding of what to look out for also for the future. I mean, this is likely the new norm, as I'm sure we all are aware at this point, so we need to all become better prepared. Those are the two I had that I think would fit into the acceptable memo level of questions, so I'll stop there.
Thank you,
Can I comment on that quickly? Is that all right? Just real quick, it is absolutely, your request is in the top 3 of our wish list. And if I may, more cyber staff times 10 is the #1 priority. Number 2, continue to upgrade firewall switches, basic infrastructure, our resiliency. Number 3, training. Cyber training for everyone is absolutely we absolutely need to seriously consider reprioritizing current year funding to these 3 activities moving forward.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Jeff, as a follow-up request to that, while I appreciate that you want to consider it and think about it, I think we need to just do it. We'd like a written plan by no later than September 30th of 2019 for how cybersecurity training is going to be provided to all city users that are under BSIT's umbrella. That should include timeframes, milestones, specific delivery mechanisms for the training, and projected costs associated with the training. Bob, I'm sure that if additional resources, a reasonable level of resources, like in the 6 figures, is required for this, that this would be something that we could go to the mayor and work with his senior team on.
Couldn't agree more. Thank you.
Yeah, we would definitely consider that. Definitely in terms of reprogramming, money within the budget, we would like to work with IT to figure out what is the most effective way to secure, whether it's training or other actions. We can definitely assist with that.
And Ms. Goldstein, I assume as, Deputy Chief of Staff, this is something you'd be willing to advocate to the mayor for and provide direction to the CIO and to get BBMR to work with everyone. Thank you. Colin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Director. So immediately after the ransomware attack occurred, why wasn't there a series of communications from your office to really all city agencies or out to the public instructing folks on how they could, let's say, pay their water bills or pay a parking ticket, all the way from sort of mundane every day to more serious issues? Because we know that for a lot of people, the way everyone now is on their cell phone and pays their bills online, we sort of know if all the systems go down, it's going to be crippling, and people are going to have an enormous amount of anxiety and questions. And so instead of having an immediate response that was publicly communicated, I continue to get emails every single day from constituents who want to know, do I have to pay my water bill? What am I supposed to do? and there just hasn't seemed to be much of a coordinated response, though I do appreciate that Mayor Young is now putting out these videos that are really helpful. I just would have thought that your agency in particular, given that you are BCIT, you are the tech infrastructure for the city, would have had some communication protocols in place, because we're not the first city that this has happened to.
Frank, before you answer, Councilman Cohen, I want to add to your list of things that were out. Email to elected officials and agencies, water billing and collections in both the city and the county, parking ticket collections, real estate transactions, and the production of lien sheets, minor privilege permit system, special events permit system, environmental citations collections, tax sale confusion because of inability to communicate via email, real estate transactions for non-traditional transactions. We're talking like foreclosures, things like that. Even though I applaud Mayor Young for having put in a workaround so quickly for our traditional real estate transactions. City voicemail being down, data uploads to Open Baltimore, Liquor Board, BMZA, Planning Commission, and CHAP hearing agendas, electronic distribution. Each of those agencies have distro lists. ECB hearings have been canceled, city payments to vendors, etc.
So I want to start off, first of all, by stating the obvious. Certainly it's obvious to everyone here that BCIT runs a pretty lean and mean shop. One of the things that's missing from our portfolio of capability is basic communication, blocking and tackling. We do have a single point of failure. We have an amazing chief of staff who's currently on maternity leave. Lindsay Wines sends her regards. New baby and mom are home, really getting to know each other. We do not have a PIO or a communication plan or strategy. So what we did was we phoned people who we knew could help us. The first call went to MOEM to help set up communications. David McMillan was in our office within 24 hours and helped set up communication capability and structures to the rest of the city. Second request went to the mayor's office. We obviously need help communicating with the outside world so that we could stay focused on getting the city back online. A lot of the questions you're asking about workarounds and what are we doing while we have this outage was directed through the mayor's office. Cheryl Goldstein is coordinating that activity, and still to this date, she could speak to that. And again, the immediate call went to David McMillan. He was in our office in less than 24 hours and set up a command and control to help communicate to the agencies what was going on within BCIT so that we could stay focused on getting the city back online as quickly as possible. Would you like to hear from either one of them to talk about exactly what they did to activate communications?
Mr. President?
But before you do that, Mr. Johnson, I
Yes, sir.
think that you're not fully understanding what the councilman is saying. There are agencies in the city that don't have the budget that you have that communicate. What he's saying is that he understands, we all understand what we were going through. But what was unacceptable in the response that you're giving now is unacceptable is around the failure to communicate. Deputy Chief Goldstein didn't come into play until a week or so into the incident, right? So to pawn this off on her is unacceptable. You guys could have communicated in a far better way or went to someone else to allow them to get that message out. What we heard, not only from each other, but from the citizens, I know for myself, for example, the only reason why I was in the loop is because the mayor himself kept me in the loop. So what we heard from not just from the council, but from the agencies, including agencies who were consistently communicating with your agency, is that they did not know how to communicate or what should be communicated. And not having a PIO is not an acceptable answer,
Yes, sir.
especially in an emergency situation. That is unacceptable. The way that you guys handled that initially was unacceptable. We can't just have people go in the dark because we don't have a PIO, right? Someone has to step up and step in. The PIO that used to be in my office now works for the mayor, but we haven't missed a beat. Someone has to step up and step in to make sure that the information is going out to the public, going out to the agencies, especially when you're in a crisis situation like this. And I guess then if that was the case, then maybe we should have turned the whole operation over to Mr. McMillan if we felt like it was such an emergency that you guys couldn't totally respond. So I'm done, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President.
So, may I?
David, do you have something to add?
I just wanted to make sure that you noted I absolutely hear the feedback. And one of the things we're going to do once we have a chance to take a breath and look back on what we could have done better, there will be a formal incident response report on everything that happened and what we needed to improve going forward. And we absolutely take the feedback. City Council President, we will improve communications in situations like this from here on out. We absolutely accept that, and my sincere apologies.
So the expectation will be that there will be a major section within that report solely focusing on external communication.
External communications. I was
And internal communication.
I was on the phone actually late last night with one of the leads from the Department of Homeland Security talking about getting ready to write this report, which is going to take a few months, and you can imagine it'll be very confidential. And he said, Frank, in my humble opinion, doing a better job of crisis communications during cyber outages is in every single report that they write. We recognize that we should have done more and done a better job, and again, my sincere apologies. However, because I wanted to focus personally on helping get the city back online as quickly as possible, David McMillan and his team jumped into our office and at least set up some capability to help us stay in contact with the rest of the city agencies, and he's probably better prepared to talk about that if that's okay.
David?
Good afternoon. So going into this incident, very early on, Director Johnson contacted me, and actually one of my staff members reported for duty that morning to find lack of functionality with the computers and a ransomware issue. So the first issues or first calls that I made were to fire and police to make sure that they were taking calls for service. And then afterwards, I called Frank and then also started checking on agencies about current status in terms of operations. I think by 2 o'clock that day, we briefed Council President and Mayor Young about the nature of the incident, and we set up twice daily, conference calls to remotely coordinate around the incident. So it was 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. every day with all the agency contacts. That was our primary ways to communicate internally between the agencies. In terms of broadly communicating with city employees, traditionally we use email blasts, which is a little bit antiquated, but that's the way that we get information out to employees about general incidents. But obviously with the email outage, that presented a different challenge. I presented to the council last year about our efforts to roll out Be More Alert, which is our mass notification alert system, both publicly and internally. There's been pushes on both to get citizens registered, but also employees. And I want to say that Wednesday or Thursday, we sent out an internal alert via Be More Alert to all employees that were registered about how to handle the cyber outage in terms of how to handle their computers, their technology, what to expect. We also were using the state's web EOC platform to do remote coordinations around this. In terms of Chairman Costello, I think initially you said that you were disappointed that the EOC was not activated. My Deputy Director, Tony Smith, and also other members of my staff have been to numerous trainings on cybersecurity and the role of EOC in cybersecurity events. And more or less the best practices or wisdom around that is that you treat it the same way as any other event in terms of leading indicators in public safety. Are your police, fire, EMS able to take calls for service? Sheriff's office, are they able to serve emergency protective orders, warrants, et cetera? What's happening with all city services? So clearly this was a serious impact in terms of continuity of operations, but in terms of public safety,
So,
the
Mr.
public
McMillan,
safety environment was.
I would respectfully disagree with that because we know that police and fire were impacted in some capacity.
In terms of calls for service and their ability to respond in terms of what's happening.
I would disagree. Constituents were unable to email the police department. There were voicemail that were down, and that presents a public safety threat. It does.
Well, I think there's an impact to operations, certainly, but in terms of the indicators, the leading indicators that we usually analyze in the EOC, if we're looking at police CAD, fire CAD, units that are in service, out for service, all of those indicators, those things were all working with the COOP workarounds as normal.
Well,
So, and I wasn't requested to have a document, but I have a document if you would like to see either now or later about kind of some of those decisions that were made during the incident.
yes, we would like a copy of that. I'm registered for Be More Alert. I remember the luncheon you came to. I never received any communication during this incident. There should be some type of policy requiring all city employees to have their personal cell phone and their personal email in some directory that we have access to so that we can communicate with city employees when our IT infrastructure goes down, period. We don't have
agree.
that. So
So I would love to work with you on trying to get that kind of guidance. I think there's issues with personal information and privacy that we'd have to work through, but I'd love to have a policy like that where we can get all city employees registered on the system to receive alerts. In
Judge-
terms of the record of the alerts, we could go over that in private. I can
absolutely.
log you into this so you can see the alerts that we sent out during this incident.
Okay, and I don't know why I'm not receiving them. Judge Davis, would the appropriate mechanism for having that require, and Councilman Cohen, I'm coming right back to you as soon as we wrap this up. Judge Davis, would the appropriate mechanism to require the administration to have some type of directory of emergency contact information for all city employees, would that be something that, recognizing there's privacy issues, that we would pass in an ordinance or something that the mayor could just direct? Do you have any initial thoughts on that? And if you don't, I'm putting you on the spot, that's fine. We can talk about it later.
I think it's very problematic. I think it's very problematic.
Okay. Well, I worked for a federal agency for 8 years, and we were all required to do that. So I would like to work with you to try and find a creative way to do that. So if Judge Davis, if you could provide us something in writing, have one of your attorneys research this and figure out what we need to do to ensure that our emergency manager and other key personnel in the city, very limited number of personnel, have that information available so that they can use some type of system to communicate with those people. And if you
My guess is most people would volunteer. Virtually all would volunteer, but I would be concerned about the 1 or 2 or 3 or 6 who chose not to volunteer. I'd be concerned that no adverse action ever be taken against the person. But we can further explore this.
I appreciate it, Judge. Thank you. Thank you, David. Councilman Scott, are you good with David's response? Yep.
Mr. Director, I just want to say, while I think a lot of the agency heads appreciated the calls, what they won't tell you that they'll tell me is that they also felt like a lot of the information wasn't very helpful to them. And that's why I said what I said to the director. And we have to come up with some protocol of how we can share information, and even to what extent we can, information that can be used for specific agencies, because they felt like they were on these calls, but they were on the call and some of them just said, like, I just felt like I wasted my time. I haven't learned anything more. I still don't have clarifications about the questions that I've been asking. And then, of course, if they have questions, undoubtedly how these things work, people are humans, they have questions, they relay that to their staff relays that to the citizenry, and then we have this cycle of people asking for more information and clarification. That's how you get many different things out there into the public realm, and that's why we have to have a more succinct process.
So if I can respond very quickly. The purpose of those calls was around continuity of operations and making sure that city operations, we were working on the workarounds. We're implementing current workarounds to make sure we were continuing our services. And they weren't to get into the investigation in terms of the IT incident or the nature of the ransomware or a lot of facts that are being integrated into the incident command with Director Johnson that I knew. And I think that's challenging. I think one challenge with this information is that people typically don't want to know this information to keep it to themselves. We want to communicate it to constituents. We want to communicate with family and friends. But it's a federal investigation and a very sensitive issue. So these calls were very much focused on, okay, you don't have email. How do we share temporary email addresses? How do we share communication? The city's website was up during the incident, and we had a banner on the city webpage with a list of contacts for all the major services and all the agencies. So there was a basically de facto directory up with a statement about what was happening and our efforts to restore services. So we were doing our best to communicate in the environment, knowing that, just to be honest, we're in a world where we rely on technology very heavily to communicate. And I think we were fortunate during this incident that landline phones were still in service. 800 megahertz radios, which is the backbone of public safety communications, was operational. Personal cell phones, business cell phones were all operational. And critical infrastructure, like all the hospitals, traffic control, all of those things were operational. So the experience of the average citizen out and about in the city of Baltimore is that business was continuing. Obviously, in terms of their ability to transact financially with the city, there was impacts that we discovered very early on. And I think within a week and a half, we had a lot of those workarounds in place. So clearly, there's going to be an after-action process, an after-action conference and report drafted, just like the civil unrest, where we can talk about strengths and weaknesses around the response. But I think given the nature of our communications and having that outage, there is clear challenges, and I'd love to find a way to get more citizens enrolled in Be More Alert, and obviously more employees, if not all employees, enrolled in Be More Alert, but also understand that the information we would have been able to share on those platforms wouldn't have been about the details of the investigation or about the exact cyber position that we're in. It would have been about, if you need to get this permit done, this is how you can try to achieve that, or if you need to pay this bill, this is how we will or won't be enforcing that. So really, COOP is where OEM came into play here. I tried to do the best to be a good foil for the agencies and for citizens to find information out about COOP while letting BSIT do the really challenging and important work of restoring us and getting these emails back up, which is in process.
And David, you hit the nail on the head to the president's point about that basic information, and Councilman Cohen, that basic information, like, what do we do about our water bill? We know that the mayor made the right decision and said that he's going to waive all late fees. Folks don't know that, so
Right.
we need to get that information out to the general public.
Certainly. We'll work on improving crisis communications moving forward, certainly.
Thank you. Councilman Cohen?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, for Mr. Johnson. Just to sort of make a fine point, we know that this ransomware attack occurred on the tail end of a major mayoral scandal where we now have a new mayor. And so faith in government was already deeply shaken at the time when this occurred, and not having clarity, not having basic information about what folks could do has caused enormous distress in the communities that I represent, and I'm guessing for my colleagues as well. And so again, the fact that I can almost guarantee you there are some council members that don't know the answer to, are we supposed to be paying our water bills? How do we do it? Do we send a check for a similar amount as a previous bill? Will it actually be recorded? All of these things that city agencies should have had an immediate response to, that should have been coordinated through your office. Still, the information is not fully there, because I just learned the answer to that question both in watching one of Mayor Young's videos and in speaking directly to DPW. And I guarantee you, if I didn't know that until a couple of days ago, most of the public out there didn't as well. And so I think my request to you is, for those types of questions, we need to be able to communicate something immediately. And so I would like Mr. Ambrose to get just a basic fact sheet on what the public is supposed to be doing as this attack continues.
So so really that's been the administration's responsibility, not Director Johnson's responsibility. And I think two things. So one is, there's no question that the administration, certainly since the time I got here, was very focused on diagnosing what those problems were and addressing them and creating workarounds, and did not do a good job of communicating them to the council or to the public. We certainly did what we could to get the information out publicly through press releases or videos, but I think we're trying so hard to build the plane as we were flying it, in terms of trying to find solutions to these problems as we learned of them, that the communications aspect was not well incorporated into that. And so that's definitely on us. It's not really on Director Johnson, who was really directed to focus exclusively on the IT issues. I think we do have a good working FAQ document with questions like this and answers and the workarounds that have been developed, and we need to get that to all of you. And it's something I've been talking about and emailing about while we've been in this hearing. We need to get a full comprehensive FAQ list to everybody here, and we will do that. I think I can commit to do that by Monday. I would commit to do it by the end of the day, but that seems unrealistic at this point. So I think that that's really on the administration and not on Director Johnson. So that is something we will get to you, if not by the end of this day, but certainly by Monday.
I would sincerely hope we could actually get it today.
You can have, certainly you can have what we have. There are new things that, like, there was an issue that was recently brought to our attention yesterday. There is a fix being put in place for that. That's going to get added, right? So we're going to be giving you we can give you updated information each day.
Okay, I mean, again, that would be helpful because I can guarantee you everyone who's sitting here has had myriad constituents come up to us or hit us either on our temporary Gmail accounts or now that our email is back saying, what am I supposed to do? And the information has not been clearly presented. And so we really need that today.
Okay, we'll get that to you.
Thank you.
Mr. President.
Just to follow up on that, and Deputy Chief, thank you for getting the agencies in line and in order on that. But I think that, again, like I said earlier, it shouldn't have to take you to take over that for that to happen. Literally, the second day, I suggested that we get a sheet for all contact, all information, everything that the agencies need to put out to the public, and each agency should get that provided to the council, but also provided to the public. 4 days later, Rec and Parks was the only one that had submitted something. We have to, unfortunately, running a city is building a plane and flying at the same time. That's just the nature of the beast. We can't afford to not have that stuff happening in a timely and efficient manner. And while we appreciate you and Mr. McMillan's work to do that, now that we've been through that kind of stuff, we just can't have that happen, and people will still have the questions. But just a follow-up on that, and I guess, Mr. Solicitor, this is really for you and for the finance department, especially around water bills. We know, even though Director Chow wrongfully said in this chambers this week that DPW doesn't send out erroneous water bills, the council, I think we all laughed when he said that because we spend 80% of our time dealing with erroneous water bills. We know that, one, the water bill system in Baltimore is broken already. Two, we're dealing with citizens who are faced with increased water bills, significantly increased water bills consistently, and citizens who are already dealing with a system that they can't handle financially. What have you guys thought about the impacts of that, of folks who we're going to get now these larger bills, and they can barely afford to pay the monthly bill? And to begin with, in addition to the monthly bill may or may not being correct in the first place, have we thought about that, both the fiscal impact but also the legal impact of if folks are not being able to pay those, are we going to come up with some creative payment plan? Because this isn't as a result of them, and I know that I, along with my colleagues, went and spoke to every single person we could to say, you're supposed to get a water bill, put money aside. But when you're a lady that's working 2 and 3 jobs to take care of your 3 kids, and you have an extra $40 for food, you're going to spend that extra $40 for food because the children are hungry. Have we thought about that at all?
I can guarantee you we have, Mr. President. Our collections unit, which is physically over on Redwood, they make their living entering into very reasonable, low-cost payment plans with every city resident, no matter what the bill is. It can be an environmental violation, it could be a parking, it could be water bill. If people are having difficulty, particularly under emergent situations like this, meeting their obligations, we will sit down with them for as long as it takes and talk to them face to face and work out a payment plan.
Thank you.
And Mr. President, we have some deals, honestly, where people are paying $2 a week. I mean, we don't charge interest, but we help people pay their bills, and we will do that, I guarantee you.
Thank you. And Mr. Amaros, just a follow-up, if we can get an official stance on how we're going to deal with payments and payment plans as a result of the cyber outage. Thank you.
I just wanted to say very quickly.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. In terms of getting the contact information together for citizens by which they could transact and deal with government, we had posted that on the city website within the first week. There was an official statement of what was occurring. Here are the numbers for various services within each department. I think we could have done better in terms of explaining a lot of those workarounds and the nature of how that all worked, and we'll work on that in terms of the after action, in terms of crisis communication. But as Deputy Chief of Staff said, it was also a lot of processes that were being worked out real time. And I hear your point. We have to communicate those better. I think in terms of continuity of operations and continuity of operations planning, I think most local government units would tell you it's a challenge to get, when you have sometimes lack of time and resources, the mundaneness of creating COOP plans that are effective. Sometimes it's not the top priority. We've gotten pretty good buy-in over the last year of having agencies work through our workshops to work on their COOP plans, but even then, a lot of those plans are still, just barely above template level. And we're going to work with City Stat Smart and the Deputy Chief of Staff to take the findings and the workarounds that were discovered or created through this incident and integrate those further into the COOP plans to improve those. So I really look forward to the moment that this investigation's over and we're largely out of the acute incident and we have the after action conference and report and we're able to speak more openly, honestly, with you all to tell the story of exactly what happened, which clearly there are points for improvement, but I think there's also a good story to tell in terms of what we did to pull together to basically try to restore service and work our way through this. So I hear all the criticisms. We'll be working on documenting those. Actually, in our web EOC platform, we've given all the city reps who are in that a form to talk about after action items for what needed to be improved, a very honest form. So that'll also go into the after action report.
Thank you. Yeah, I look forward to a very long cybersecurity committee hearing when we have it. The next question, Mr. Solicitor, is for you too. And Frank, you too, Mr. Director, if you guys can answer. So if this is a question that we can answer today, I want to talk about whether the city had insurance for cybersecurity, why or why not?
We're looking at that, Mr. President. The policies that are out there and the city's policy exclude acts of terrorism. And part of what we are looking at is exactly that. That's really all I can say about it. I don't think.
So, just a follow up on that. I've spoken with more than I can imagine at this point. Several business owners who were the victim of something similar, and they had cybersecurity or the exact same thing in some cases, and they said their insurance covered it. So can you explain what the difference would be for them versus us as a government entity? If they're saying that their insurance, they had insurance, they were ransomware attacked, they paid a deductible, it was paid off, and then they went back to business.
If you'll allow me to step away from the issue of ransomware.
Yeah, just in general. Yeah, yes, sir.
Right, just
yes,
in general. Just
absolutely.
in general. And I'm not being glib or snarky, Mr. President, but insurance companies don't like to pay. And when you fight them hard enough, sometimes agreements can be reached. And the whole issue of what's excluded, what's covered, are very complicated legal issues that we are looking at very carefully.
Okay, and we can talk more about that later after the incident's over.
Let me also say, I think in my 9 or so years with city government, my experience is that self-insurance has more or less been the policy. I think part of that is that when it comes to disasters, natural disasters mostly, and this is a whole topic, the federal government helps us with Stafford Act declarations and public assistance reimbursement at a 75-25 cost share for natural disasters. But they don't do that for anything that you are that you get assistance you get through your insurance. So there's a disincentive over time to insure certain things if you're looking to get disaster reimbursement from FEMA on that. Now let me say, I know there's been talk through a number of elected officials about trying to seek reimbursement for this from the feds. The federal government has not declared a Stafford Act declaration for any cyber event. There's been 22 ransomware attacks on government entities in the United States in 2019 alone in the years and up. None of those have declarations. Atlanta's 2018 ransomware event did not receive a federal declaration, so it's highly unlikely that FEMA chooses to make an exception for Baltimore. In fact, FEMA's approach to this federally right now is to try to reduce local and state governments' reliance on public assistance and the Stafford Act during emergencies. So there's an interaction here with historically how we've received assistance during snowstorms, during hurricanes, during natural events, and how we, after hitting certain thresholds, can get that 75-25 cost share. But if you're insured for that, then that changes the picture often. So I think the environment with that federally is evolving, but I can say that when it comes to cyber events, it's not likely that we get that. We are very early, and Frank and I discussed making sure that we're tracking costs. So the account numbers were created, so we have numbers on what we're spending. If we were to receive reimbursement, or if you all lobbied effectively with our delegation and with our senators and representatives to get some kind of reimbursement, but the Stafford Act and public assistance is not the likely avenue for that.
Thank you. Mr. Johnson, I have one more question for you now, then we're going to transition into 311. You've been with the city for about a year and a half.
18 months, yes, sir.
18 months. How many external conferences have you attended, and how many of those have been focused primarily on security?
I'm thinking. Half a dozen, less than half a dozen. I'll have to get you the breakdown of the conference. Security is always an element, but a security-specific conference, I have not attended a security-specific conference, to my recollection.
Thank you. Pardon me. Thank you. Jeff, we'd like a list of all BOE-approved conferences that Mr. Johnson's attended, title of the conference, the date, the location, and total travel cost. We'd like that for Mr. Johnson as well as all senior staff at BSIT. What's that, 133?
135.
Thank you. Miss Allen, I know we got to get you out of here by 4:30. Yes, ma'am. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
One of the issues with the previous 311 system is that when you filed the service request, if it was closed out by, for example, a sinkhole, and you said it goes to DOT, and maybe there was a water issue there, DOT would close out the service request. DPW would create a new service request, so the constituent would see that the request has been closed, and then they come home at night, and the pothole or sinkhole is still there, and then they call their councilman and scream, or councilwoman and scream. It happens to all of us. Has the new 311 system corrected that issue?
Well, let me first talk about this system. First of all, we went to
Can you come a little closer to the mic,
Sure.
Lisa?
We went to Salesforce about 18 months ago. We successfully launched Salesforce in September of this year. So, one thing that we were able to do is go back and train the agencies on a consistent and constant way to close out service requests, transfer service requests, or link service requests. Now, these processes have always been in the works, but training and people moving to other jobs, not doing things consistently is what really caused that problem. So with Salesforce, we were able to put some preventative measures in place to, for example, make things necessary before you can save it or close it, to make the agency kind of get them a hint that they have to fill this in or they have to check it. So to your answer, sir, a service request is open. Let's say the water department did something. They have to transfer it to another department. That is the agency's responsibility to consistently transfer or link that original request so it does not close.
The originating
Original service request, so it does not close and goes on to the next agency to handle it. So then when they're done, if the whole situation is done, when they close it, it'll come back and close all what we call the parent and children service requests. The customer should not get that close message until all of that happens. So with the new system being able to configure it from the beginning, we again were able to put in those processes. We spent a lot of time training the agencies. We went on site and we still are available for training. So hopefully the workflow, the agencies will respect the workflow and they will close those things, transfer those things, and leak those things, leaving the customer with the original service request.
Okay, and if we have issues with that, should we be going to the agency head or should we bring that to your attention?
You can go to the agency head, but we will be happy again to retrain and train the agency. We go on site. My team does an excellent job going on site, showing them exactly with their service requests what they should do. Our first training was very broad. It encompassed the whole city. We were getting them introduced to Salesforce, but then we narrowed our training down to specific things to each agency. So if you go to the agency, if you see something lacking, what we will do is we definitely will go back and retrain the agency.
Thank you very much, and keep up the outstanding work, Lisa.
Thank you
Huge
very
fan.
much. I have a very good team that helps me. I appreciate it.
We're going to go Burnett, then Schleifer, and then Stokes. And Councilman Stokes, are you 311 or BSIT? Okay. We're going to take just 311 requests for now because Miss Allen has to leave at 4:30, and right now it is 3:38.
Okay, I'll be quick. And if you don't have this in front of you, we can make it a request.
Okay.
Your call takers, one, do a great job. And I've gotten good feedback about the app. Couple, hiccups here and there, but it seems to be moving forward nicely. But my question was more for the call takers. So when people call, I imagine you're probably getting a plethora of situations, some that may be sort of appropriate to just, a pothole. But I would also imagine there are people calling who may be in dire straits or, other sort of personal situations that need to be referred over to 911. So let me get to the question. The question is, what type of training do the call takers undergo around being able to identify things like potential child welfare situations, human trafficking, domestic violence? Are they given any training to be able to, any sort of trauma training to handle those type of calls? Because I'm sure they come in even sort of at a minimal, but are they given similar training that a 911 call taker would get to be able to navigate difficult situations?
Okay, so our initial training is about 6 to 8 weeks, and we definitely go through agency, city service, information type situations. The interesting thing in Baltimore is when people are having an emergency, they call 911. They don't call 311. And what they'll do is call 911, and it's not really an emergency, which is why I also manage the non-emergency unit of 311. So in the non-emergency unit of 311, we can answer non-emergency police calls. We can also write reports under certain conditions to keep the officers on the street. So to your question, in terms of human services and resources, we partner with 211. So we will actually refer people to 211 for domestic violence, needing help with food, needing those types of things. And 211 is managed by the state, but we have a very good relationship with them. We also have a good relationships with human services and health. So we know when to transfer, when to refer someone to one of those types of places. 311 refrains from doing anything that we need to gather personal information. So that's why we partner with those agencies. But the initial training for city services, general information, and police non-emergency is about 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay. And then the second would just be a request. Occasionally the system does go down. I'd request that when that occurs, that the council be given some sort of alert or communication so that we are also aware when 311 is down. So that, because I've gotten those calls from people or text messages from community leaders saying, hey, I was trying to report something, system's not working, and usually it takes me pulling out the app to also confirm that. It'd be helpful to know so that if we get those calls, we can say, yes, it's down, and we're expecting resolution within hours or days or whatever that is.
Sure,
So that
no
would just be just a communications piece that we can improve.
And I think going forward, we'll see that less because Salesforce also is in the cloud. So if hiccups happen, especially with the app, we saw that in the beginning, but we did fix those things, but we definitely will communicate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Schleifer?
Yes. The 311 department, who do they essentially work for?
We are under BSIT, the information technology, and one reason we are is because we use the information from 311 to measure agency performance. So we're kind of in a neutral position, so we've always been under the information technology umbrella.
So I guess from a neutral position, I guess I have an interesting question. So I use the 311 app all the time, as I encourage my constituents to do so as well. When things get put into 311, one of two things happen. It either gets done or it doesn't get done, right? And there's a whole bunch of reasons for why certain things get done, certain things don't, why certain things get closed out, etc., right? So when somebody puts it in, they want to see that that situation gets done. When you go, and I just took one of my last requests, I put into 311, and I get an email right away, and it says, City of Baltimore 311 service request confirmation, and it gives the number. All right, so what that tells me as a citizen, I put in a request of my government to get something done, and I'm hoping that they respond to get it done. All right? Now, if it doesn't get done, you know what happens? Nothing. I'm sitting here with this confirmation, and I call my council person, and I badger them, and hopefully they can help me get it done. Now, on the flip side, when it actually does get done, then I get another email follow-up, and it says, this one says, Mayor Bernard C. Jack Young thanks you for using the 311 service. So can you explain why on the front end it would be saying City of Baltimore, and on the back end it would say the mayor, when we all know that in between, if, you know, in the many situations where things don't get done, that it's the council people and the council people staff who's the one that's actually working on executing it. So are we all a team in the beginning and then, you know, we're not a team at the end? I mean, I'm just curious who made that decision and how that, you know, it just sticks out a little strange and actually came up at a community meeting. So now that we have you in front of us, I figured I'd ask how that happened.
A very easy change. However, that originated because when the survey was first implemented, it was implemented through CityStat, which was the office of the mayor, and they requested that the mayor's name be on the survey. The City of Baltimore did get your request. We don't know where we're going to, they don't, you know, it may go to transportation. It gets routed right away to the agency, but that's a more broad statement. But that's the simple answer to the question. The survey originated from the mayor's office, and that's what they wanted on the survey.
Well, I'd like to make a request on behalf of the City Council that either it's owned from the start to the finish the same way, or, you know, basically that there's consistency, that the same way it's being submitted, it should just be the same way it comes out, and however you'd like it to be, I'm fine with it personally. I just want it to be consistent.
Fine with me.
Thank you.
I'll discuss that with the right people.
Thank you.
Mr. Councilman, I just want to make sure we log that officially here. So you're requesting that the 311 start and finish uses the same nomenclature throughout?
Just that we're using the same, you know, it's just like when you're writing a story, you want to refer to the, you know, the person in the story as the same, you know, in the same tense and the same person. And so I'm just asking that, you know, if it's going to a specific person or city and that's the person who's getting it done, that we're just using the same terms from the start when we don't know if the situation is going to get resolved, and to the back end once we know it's already resolved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and if I may make another suggestion, I know people are used to calling their council people when they call 311 too, but if something doesn't get done, please direct the citizens to call 311, because we have a process in place that we can work with the agency and make sure those things get done.
Oh, and we do, and we appreciate that. And I'll tell you, from when I started to now, I've seen dramatic improvements in 311, and thank you for a lot of improvements on the app. And I actually did send over some bugs that I saw in the system when it was rolled out to Mr. Johnson, and he saw to it that those bugs got fixed, some location-based things and some other just regular logs that we were used to. So there has been a lot of progress there. That's just something that came up in a community meeting, and I didn't think about it until I went back and actually looked to see what they were talking about and realized from my requests, and I put in plenty of them, that it had a different thing. So I just, you know, I like to keep things consistent.
No problem.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other 311 related questions? Councilman Burnett?
Sorry, just kind of triggered something in me. So I had a constituent call, I want to say maybe a few weeks ago, and this, I guess, sort of loops into what the council person is getting at here, where whatever the issue wasn't resolved to that person's satisfaction, and the 311 call taker said, well, you should call your council person. and gave him my number and everything. And I spoke to that person. I mean, whatever, we got it done. But I was surprised that, that they would be referred from the administration to the legislative branch of government when they've called the administration for support. And I don't mind my constituents calling me. In fact, I encourage it, and I tell them to call 311 and send me the number all the time. So I'm willing to step up. But to his point, I think for me, that was a very interesting thing. And I've actually gotten similar referrals from the administration, and I'm not putting this on you, but where people have actually directly called the mayor's office, and the person at the front desk said, well, did you call your council person first? For me, that's odd with, someone's calling the mayor of Baltimore, they want the mayor's office to resolve it, which, all of these agencies are under the mayor's office. And I'm not putting that on you, but it did occur. I don't think it's a common occurrence where that referral would be made, but it did happen. And if it happens again, I'll be sure to reach out to you to just get some clarification. And in that instance, if they do call me, I would like the email to go back out to say that, Councilman Burnett resolved this problem for you. Thank you, the 8th District of Baltimore. Otherwise, just wanted to add on to that, Mr. Chair.
And I apologize if that came from 311. That's not the process. But when we do get inquiries like that, we do ask the customer if they know who they spoke to, because there's several agencies in the city that also give out information and phone numbers as well. So if you can ask your customer caller if they remember the name of the person they spoke with, because one thing in 311, we start out with a very specific script, and everyone should say their name. And I know sometimes you're not listening, but that just helps us with training purposes, because we like to keep all the calls in 311.
If there are no other 311 calls, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your
Appreciate
consideration.
We'll continue with further questions related to BSID. Councilman Stokes.
This is probably for Mr. Miller. It's just we already know we had a ransom hack and still been an investigation. My question is the solution. That's what I want to talk about. Have y'all come up with some solutions to make sure this don't happen again? Because we can keep talking about where it is now, but I think this discussion should be about solutions and where we are with that, so this doesn't happen again.
So the answer to that is every one of these, with experts helping us, there will be a full incident response report. What happened, what could we have done better, and what needs to be improved moving forward. There will be a time and a place for that report to be done.
If I can interject,
Yes,
Director
sir.
Johnson. Councilman Stokes, I think that what was stated earlier is that through the Cybersecurity and Emergency Preparedness Committee, a lot of those questions will be resolved as we have an opportunity to really talk about greater details and the measures that will be implemented, so that the possibility of this happening.
I got it later. But one other question that I want to just ask is, Al, are we with Microsoft? Is that that's we use Microsoft?
We have many products, some new, some old. We are primarily, from an infrastructure standpoint, a Microsoft shop, and that's pretty
Have we ever
widely
looked
known.
at maybe going to Google? Because the state of Maryland uses Google, and that seemed to be working. It's just a suggestion when you start going
We're
back.
going to thoughtfully consider every option right now. We just got to recover what we have. But as part of the longer term recovery, we'll be looking at many, many options.
Okay. Thank you.
And just very quickly, this isn't really so much of a solution as an eventual ask, and I guess this is a good forum to make it. Director Johnson and I have been talking about this for the last 6 months plus, about the need for a new emergency operations center. Currently, my office is the second emergency operations center. It's in a Cold War civil defense bunker that was built in 1952. Risk management has come out and inspected the office and said there's likely mold, improper air handling, and it's not meant to be inhabited for long-term use. So really, we need to get that done. But I bring this up because really a state-of-the-art facility would have some of the redundancies that I think we are looking for, in terms of, ideally, it would be somewhere out of the downtown area. A lot of our critical infrastructure is unfortunately all located in the same area, so even just a physical incident could lose us access to City Hall, fire headquarters, and police headquarters very easily. So I'd love to have an EOC that's located somewhere outside of the downtown area that has all the modern infrastructure you would need, including backup 911, 311, various, basically a surge capacity for backup call center space for all the agencies that have call centers, like DPW has Control One. We would have, obviously, ideally, the IT spend to have an environment where we could have a hot swap, or at least a limited network still going during the incident that's separate. But all of that comes with a price tag, and the document that I'll give out to you all later has some cost estimates. But that's not a solution to this acute problem of the ransomware, and I think that was off limits to the discussion. But in terms of what we can do to make ourselves more resilient and I think more effective during emergencies would be to have some modern infrastructure. I think most jurisdictions of our size, I know that New Orleans just recently built a new EOC, but we could go around and look at other jurisdictions, but it's time to invest some capital, I think, in that endeavor and having a cybersecurity presence there, command that could operate separately. I think that would be very important.
Thank you. Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two quick, and maybe the first one, let me know if it is or isn't something that can be answered, but there was mention earlier in the hearing of a number of other municipalities that have experienced these similar attacks, Atlanta being one of them. Can you speak to communications that were, after that attack occurred in Atlanta, steps that your department took, if you're able to disclose those, or communication about any of that last year?
Actually, I told that story earlier. I could tell
Okay,
it.
my apologies.
That's right. I could tell it again.
If it's on the record, I'll go back and watch it again. No worries. Yeah.
Are you asking if there were communications after the Atlanta attack or after our attack?
Atlanta, after the Atlanta attack.
So you're saying after the Atlanta attack?
Yes. So we talked about that earlier. So the question is, what do we do in response to any attack, whether somebody attacks us or someone else is attacked? So I'll state it again. So lessons learned from Atlanta. The question was asked of me very, very recently.
Yep.
No, I'd be happy to go through things. This is a very, very important point. Every time there is a cyber incident, whether it's us or someone else, we have a response that we roll through. So they were attacked by a year and 3 months ago by SamSam. So our cyber team is connected to a couple of government agencies who immediately put out incident reports, which we immediately read, and they come with recommendations on what to do. They said harden your perimeter. With these capabilities, we hardened our perimeter. Implement the patches of any of the vendors in order to prevent against SamSam. Implement new detection technology. Council approved this new detection technology, which we deployed last year to help prevent, once the ransomware is inside of your environment, how to limit its destructive capability. We stepped up our end user campaign on phishing emails from a cyber end user awareness standpoint. We had all of our cyber teams on high alert to be watching for traces of that particular, and then we updated every one of our policies and procedures to reflect all of those changes. And that was our response to someone else that was attacked. We would follow a similar protocol, and by the way, we are whenever we're attacked. And by the way, this is pretty much standard operating procedure for any IT department.
And the only thing I would add to that that should occur moving forward is communications to city workers and the council when again, sort of what I was trying to get at around the training piece. Obviously, we have thousands of city workers. Training each and every worker is a monumental task. However, I would ask that if there are things that could be learned from those other cities, or just a reminder to go out that via an e-blast, hey, this occurred in Atlanta, these are the steps that we're taking, whatever you are able to share with community. There is no such thing as too much communication. I would just toss that out there as a piece of advice that could help with just this general need to better train and educate city staff, city workers across our entire network.
Point taken, point well received.
The other question I had was, and maybe you covered this earlier. Again, my apologies for being late to the hearing.
No worries.
So my understanding is that there were outside contractors. Were there outside contractors brought in to help assist your team with the attack or with the recovery? There are.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
I don't need to know
No,
who.
it's a very-
It's a sort of going a different direction. I don't need to know who or what
But
they're
no,
doing.
that's fine, but it's a very important point to make.
Sure.
I mean, one of, again, getting back to our number one priority is staffing. You know, those skills are amazingly specialized that we just don't have them. They had to be brought in to help us.
No judgment on that. That wasn't really what I was trying to get to.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Don't really need to know what they're doing. But are there MBE and WBE requirements that the agency has to or has abided by with bringing in contractors during emergency situations? And I don't know if this is more for the law department.
Yeah, so if I recall, oh, are they here?
Aaron may not have heard the question, but you're
No. So if I recall correctly, both the law department and the head of finance declared a state of emergency so we get the people and resources we needed in immediately in order to remediate, recover, and get this thing under control.
Right, but the question is whether
Oh.
there were MBE, WBE.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know.
You want to, Aaron? All that stuff's being packaged up right now.
Hello. In addition to, Aaron Chair, Department of Finance, in addition to additional resources, which we do have a list of MBEs and WBEs who have bid on support contracts for BSIT, we also utilize contracts we had in place already, and they did have goals as well.
And what are they? What are those?
I can't comment on actual utilization right now.
Okay. Could we put that as a request for later?
A report will be going to the Board of Estimates.
Sure. Whenever time. Yeah, I don't need it tonight. Just generally, it was a request
Absolutely.
I got.
And to the council.
To the council, yeah.
I'm sorry, as part of the regular emergency procurement process, we do submit a report to the Board of Estimates, but we will have a report that can be shared as well. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I just want to kind of dovetail off that question. Are there specific clearances that are related to those types of positions or those types of contractors and that? And I don't know if that's, that question is off limit. Like, is there? You said that these are contractors that are already in place that we may have used early.
Oh.
I mean, I'm just assuming that they will have access to some very sensitive information. Are there high levels of clearances that are required for those contractors?
So the people that came in 24 hours absolutely specialized in cyber incident response. Every one of them signed a confidentiality agreement the minute that they hit the ground. And we remind everybody that's in our shop, BCIT proper, daily about the sensitivity and confidentiality of the work's going on. There are reminders hung all over the environment, no pictures, and constant daily reminders about the work that's going on there.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Good afternoon. I found my second question.
Thank you.
Okay, so in Service 805, you talked about the $5 million in the additional internal service budget for the purchase of new radios appropriated in police's emergency communication service.
Yes.
So $627 in the police says this budget includes $5 million for the purchase of new radios. So I'm just trying to get a clarification of, is there $5 million in both budgets?
No.
No, so there's $5 million in general fund appropriation in 627 in police, which at some point during the year we will journal entry into an internal service fund that BCIT manages. The reason we do that is there's a lot of things around the city, like fleet, facilities, that we allocate out into the agencies to show the true cost, the general fund cost of operating those agencies. And we move the appropriation at year end to reimburse those internal service funds.
Hang on one second, Councilman. I'm sorry for throwing that at you. That was not kind. We're all good with 311? Lisa, you can head back to wherever you need to go. Thank you. Appreciate your service and everything you're doing, Lisa. Councilman, I apologize.
No, certainly. I was like, if I'd realized that my question was keeping Lisa here unnecessarily, I would have let you do that first. Okay, so there's just one $5 million.
Yes, sir.
And it's in the police department's budget.
Yes, but in order for...
But it's going to get moved over to IT.
Yes.
Where it'll be spent.
Yes.
Okay.
For 1/3 of the police radios. So just, this might be too much information. There's 3,000 radios in the police department. They're about $5,000 a piece. They all need to be updated. It's $15 million. This is just for the first third of them.
We had a briefing about this. I got confused.
There was a supplemental that was done during fiscal year 19 that upgraded a lot of the infrastructure, the dispatch consoles, as well as the firehouse alerting. We're in the first phase of the replacement for police. We are looking to identify additional funds to get the rest of the way there.
Okay, so the total amount in the in-service 805 does not actually include that $5 million yet because it hasn't been moved.
They have the spending authority. They have the appropriation in order to do the spending. Okay. It gets a little accounting heavy at that point, but we do internal services to be able to allocate the costs to show the true cost of agencies. We then at some point, so the spending comes out of the internal service and the general fund or utility funds will go and reimburse the internal service.
I'm following how it should flow.
Yes.
But it feels wrong for it to be reflected in both budgets at the beginning of this year.
So in the executive summary, if you look at the actual total appropriation, not in the agency detail, but the executive summary, we actually less out the internal services.
There we go.
Out of the appropriation, but we do.
But you're reflecting it here so that we can follow it.
Exactly.
Ironically.
If not, then you wouldn't know how much we're actually spending on things like fleet, facilities, radios.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Schleifer.
So, in a hypothetical situation, which I'm pretty sure it's consistent across the board, when there is a cyber attack on any network, and you have those two choices, either way, once you get your system back, no matter how you do it, if it's backed up to the cloud or whatever, you still have to start from scratch and build up those systems because you just never know what's still in your system. That's a commonly known thing in the cybersecurity world. And you mentioned about learning from other people's experiences, and so I think we're both aware of many circumstances where, companies and organizations gambled and their systems were unlocked, right? And put the emphasis on that it's a gamble, but when that happens, how quickly would you say that increases the speed of which the systems get brought back up? Like, what percentage would you say? If the attackers unlock your system, how much quicker would a system be back up and running as opposed to if you needed to start from scratch and go out on your own and rebuild?
Sorry, I don't understand the context of the question.
Okay, let's just hypothetically say that whoever has hijacked the system says, you know what, I've had to change a heart, I'm unlocking the system. Here's your 256 digit password, and it unlocks the system. How much quicker can a system get rebuilt with that as opposed to without that?
It has little. Sorry,
Judge Davis.
In the opinion of professionals, having the keys to unlock any data does not speed up at all the recovery process because you have to carefully check and double check and recheck everything as if it was infected. Check all your backups. Even if you had the keys to recover, it does not absolutely speed up the process, and that's confirmed by the way, that's very, very common knowledge, and it's also confirmed by Department of Homeland Security, who's advising us along with our cyber experts. We still have to carefully check everything.
So then why would anybody ever pay the ransom, even if it unlocks their system? Professionally speaking.
Did we not address that earlier?
The reason they
Microphone, please, Todd. Thank you, sir.
the reason they would do that if they did not have good backups. If you don't have good backups and your system is encrypted, you have no choice but to pay the ransom to encrypt your files.
Gotcha. So the response that you're giving is based on a scenario where every single function of that corporation is backed up. Is that correct?
I wouldn't say every, but we can't go into this. This is better left for later discussion, Councilman.
Right. I mean, because, one thing, I guess, for the solicitor is that, you said that this was the decision whether to pay the ransom or not in this situation was obviously not taken lightly, and we understand that. But it was also done at the highest level of government. And so I know, we've all learned that the council was not included in that. And so organizationally speaking, I mean, the council is at the highest level of government. I mean, we're all, there's just four boxes up there at the top. And so, I mean, who ultimately then, I guess, makes that decision whether or not a ransom is paid? Is that an IT decision? Is that an administrative decision? Is that a legal decision?
I thought it was agreed earlier.
Yeah, Councilman, we're gonna move on from this line of questioning. I think it's safe to assume that the mayor is the head of the executive branch. The mayor made the decision. That's the decision that's been made, and we're not gonna discuss the context or discussions that went into that decision.
Okay.
But we can address that at a later date, absolutely. Agreed, Judge Davis?
Yes.
Thank you. You good? Council?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just close it out with, I mean, I understand that, and I'll wait for the later date if that piece is off limits. I just think it just speaks to the common theme that we've heard for decades, which is that, how the city operates as a whole, and when we look at a budget, where everybody's role is in that process. And, we're back here year over year going through a budget from agency through agency, and at the end of the day, we're just being asked to, cross our T's and dot our I's as far as, the process is concerned, but we don't actually, it's not taken to a level where we actually can, bring the stuff that our constituents want and, get that kind of dialogue going. And I would just encourage that every agency should really look at that and do what like BMMR did this year, which is, go into the community and talk to the citizens and talk to the community groups and see, just so everybody understands the process together. And I think that we'd all end up seeing, some more of the positive things that are going on in city government, as opposed to, just, things that obviously get a lot more traction, a lot more conversation out there.
Councilman, while I appreciate the point, the executive of the city made the decision. We're the legislative branch. We have the authority given to us by the charter to make laws and to conduct oversight of the executive branch. The decision's been made. We're gonna move on. President Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Johnson, what steps can the city take to reduce our reliance on hardware in order to modernize the IT infrastructure and you have better leveraging of a hybrid, scalable cloud model?
That's exactly the strategy. So a lot of the infrastructure money we spend, we want to build a hybrid cloud strategy and reduce our dependency on on-prem. All of the information that was outside of our network was not corrupted. In moving this, once we get the systems up and running, this next step is to get them out as quickly and as efficiently as we can.
So,
but that is absolutely part of the strategy.
And I think part of that probably would, of course, be a part of the capital expenditures that you're going to be making?
Yes, sir. But the cost to do that completely racks up pretty darn fast, agency by agency.
Well, I think that phase one of the enterprise resource planning project is about $6 million. Is this kind of work included in that?
That's absolutely correct. So that is the HR and finance modernization. Luckily, we started that project 6 months ago. It's very fortuitous that is hitting right now. So as soon as we stabilize finance at current state, step 2, we need to get it in a much more modern cloud-like application as quickly as we can. that is absolutely part of the strategy.
Mr. Amaros, and thank you, double follow-up for this. One, we're requesting an itemized list of how the money will be spent for that project. And then two, Director Johnson, if you could provide the action plans or what you want to be doing. I assume you'll be briefing the council about that
Yes.
in the near future anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a huge project, cuts across every agency, and it's going to improve operational efficiency for HR and finance that the city's never seen, and it absolutely is a project that is long overdue.
And I think one of the things I want to go a little bit deeper in on this particular issue is that recently we know that the city is looked at as one of these tech cities where young people are coming, to benefit from the technical opportunities here.
Absolutely.
But I want to talk about how you think that in this overhaul that can play a part of us attracting more people, but also keeping the young people in Baltimore who are coming from University of Maryland College Park, UMBC, wherever, to keep them here in order to give them jobs. But also if you have thought about partnerships with our local high schools that have IT programs. Merville, I was a computer programming major in high school. I made the mistake of going to college where my friends were making $30,000 and $40,000 the first year out of high school, doing coding and other things. Have you thought about how we can do that? Because I think that while this is important, I think it's important that we also utilize it to benefit our residents and try to grow people's employment.
So first of all, just to be clear, I came here first and foremost because of the opportunity to help grow technology in the city and help fix IT and city government second. A huge part of that is tapping into the workforce potential here because there's a huge supply and demand problem of tech talent. So we've actually activated programs. Every single month I meet with nonprofits, the education systems, businesses to talk about how can we grow our own tech talent by engaging our city's youth. I do that in partnership with MOED. I would absolutely love to come to brief you on that in more detail. People are my passion. This is in my wheelhouse. I love doing this stuff. I mentor kids personally. I teach in the city. I'm on the board of Europe. I teach kids from Empower. This is absolutely something I enjoy doing, and we absolutely have a plan and need support.
Thank you. Mr. Amaros, we'll set that meeting up in the future.
We can do that this afternoon if you'd like. I'm pretty passionate about this.
Well, we have a big agency coming behind you with a $500 million budget. So,
okay.
How can we also do a better job of getting things under control from an automation and efficiency standpoint? And I think that this is something, for both the last two questions, I would like for the gentleman from Finance to chime in too. You probably haven't been watching all the hearings because you've been busy with the IT crisis, but all of my questioning around finances in this budget has been with an eye to next year. We know that there's no doubt that the city is going to be on the hook for a significant increase to our public school system, so we have to understand that the way that our budget is this year will not be the same next year, and that we're going to have to find savings in every single place that we can find, including, police, fire, every agency that we can, in order to fully fund our public school system as what we were required by, hopefully, the passage of new state laws. Can you talk about how this plan in upgrading our systems will also, over time, we understand that there will be some initial dual operations, but over time will save the city money?
Mr. President, I'm sorry, before we move forward, can you clarify the exact deliverable you'd like for your last request?
No, it's a real simple one. The director said he was already planning to meet with the council about the plan, but phase one of the ERP project, we would like a itemized list of how that $6 million is going to be spent.
Absolutely. So the question, I'm sorry, City Council President, could you please clarify the question? It sounded like there was what level of efficiency or savings of doing this?
Talk about, in your opinion, how will modernizing these systems save the city money over time? Because My guess is that right now with a lot of the hardware and switching that out consistently, those costs build up. We know that we have outdated systems. Over time, my expectation is when you modernize and you efficientize, it also comes with a cost savings. I'm not expecting that those returns immediately, but over time.
There is actually an ROI over time. The hard cost to operate the current environment is quite significant. Once the implementation is over in year 4 or 5, the cost to operate that environment is much less. There's a hard cost. There's a huge jump in operational efficiency and how we manage the delivery of HR and finance, and that could involve people. Those numbers are being looked at and guesstimates being made. It'd probably be easier if during when we come back and talk about the first phase, we'll bring some of that financial modeling with you so you can at least get a ballpark idea of what it looks like, both hard cost and soft cost.
Gentlemen, is that okay with you?
Sorry. Yeah, we're in agreement with that. We've actually looked, actually just a few months ago, sat down with Frank and looked at what are the upfront costs for something like an ERP implementation. The savings and efficiency are a little bit harder to pinpoint, but one of the issues today is we're passing a lot of data back and forth between systems. That takes time and people, and it makes the data not real time and not available. So we do think there is savings there, but it's at least probably 3 or more years away until we start to see those savings once those systems are implemented. In terms of for other agencies, what we offer, like we've talked about, we've restarted our innovation fund where we allow agencies to make one-time investments that reduce operating costs. So that's something that we've been pushing on agencies and making sure they're aware that it exists. I've heard a theme over the course of these hearings. A lot of agencies come and say we need more people, we need more bodies, but we have to move away from that thinking process. So we offer that. And just a very small enhancement, we have what we call the Data Fellows program we're starting. We've actually utilized somebody on our staff that actually helped us automate this, which saved us a ton of time over the course of March and April. Just one person that's really skilled in that area can save a lot of manual work and just copying and pasting and those type of things. And we think that there's a lot of potential in other agencies, but we need somebody with a skill set to come in and work with agencies and start to figure those things out.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Not sure who this question is best suited toward, but has there been any discussion on coordinating our 911 and CAD systems with the county? Essentially consolidating them?
I don't know if anyone's here can talk about Next Gen 911.
Yeah, I think that would be Captain Scott Roman from
Yeah.
Fire, 911 director. Someone from police.
Councilman Costello? We need to have somebody come in and brief you on Next Gen 911. The requirements for the next generation 911 is actually being built statewide. Our current CAD environment, we're working on to make it more resilient. Some of that money was appropriated last year and upgrade the current consoles. We'd have to get somebody in here who's closer to the Next Gen 911 committee to discuss what do those plans look like statewide.
Daniel, is there a study that's being done or something at the state level the president just mentioned to me?
Yes, we are doing a staffing study as well as engaging in a general consulting contract with the same consultants that had worked with the state on that 911 funding bill.
But that's just a Baltimore City thing, the study.
Yes, the study is just for Baltimore City.
Okay, and that's just for the staffing model for the city, and that's for 911 operators and dispatch, I'm assuming?
911 dispatchers, as well as looking at different models for coordinating all the telecommunications.
Oh, okay, but it's not looking at 911 operators?
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is.
So that's the
Dispatchers
primary function of that consultant, is to do a staffing study for 911. That is a requirement of the law. In order to qualify for the additional funding, is to conduct a staffing study. But we also, they're still developing on what that pool of money will fund. So we've asked the consultants to also look at the interplay between 311 and the two dispatchers.
Okay. And do we know time frame for? Hang on one sec. Do we know the time frame for that study?
We're hoping to go to the board next month.
Okay, so we would have the study finished by end of the calendar year, plus or minus?
I believe so.
Okay.
So one other thing is just I believe we'll be doing the master blanket for the entire state. Right. Yep.
Okay.
So we're taking the lead, and other municipalities will piggyback on our contract, but we are taking the lead for the state on this issue.
And you had
I was just going to make a comment that Baltimore City is well represented at the state-driven Next Gen 911 program. Aaron is actually part of it on the procurement side, so, and I would imagine that Berlman and the rest of the guys on the technical side and operational side.
Frank, can you talk about what BSID is doing to bring high-level talent to the agency?
It is our number one priority. Every single day, we're constantly recruiting, looking. It is one of our biggest challenges, and it's one of the reasons why we think the most important hire that we had was our human capital director, who's a rock star recruiter and helping us build a program. It's more than just having recruiting. It's about having a family of capabilities that we're building for the first time in the history of the city, Eric. It is a tough slog. The job market for technology is incredibly hot. The competition for talent is fierce. Staffing is our number one priority and one of our biggest challenges.
Councilman Henry, you have any more questions? Okay. Again, so first, thank you all for being here. I want to publicly thank the employees at BSIT who have been working around the clock to try and restore our service. Again, I'm going to reiterate that I'm profoundly disappointed in what the response has been and the level of communication. My expectation, as well as the City Council's expectation, is that that is going to change. You committed that to me yesterday.
Yes, sir.
And, you know, I expect you to stick to that commitment moving forward.
Yes, sir, I will.
Okay. All right. We are now in recess, and we will be back on at 6 p.m. for Police Department.
Thank you all. Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you.